There is a stretch of battered land between the levee and the river in the Mississippi Delta that appears on no current map. A 1961 Army Corps land survey references it by a parcel number that was reclassified before the survey was filed. And there is a town in Washington County where the land transfer records simply end in 1968. No sale, no deed, no explanation. Locals across 2 counties will gesture toward the river and say nothing further. The Mississippi Delta has lost more towns to silence than to weather. 8 of them have never been fully explained. We are counting down the creepiest. It gets much darker. Number 8. Cypress Landing sat on the Believer County riverfront, a cotton landing community of 340 residents by the 1940 census. In 1958, the Army Corps of Engineers filed a levee setback order requiring relocation. The order cited flood control necessity. By 1960, the census shows 0 residents. No relocation payment ledger exists in the county's public disbursement records for that period. Here is what nobody tells you. A Corps engineer named Russell Tate filed an internal memo in 1959 noting that the setback line at Cypress Landing was drawn 400 feet further inland than the engineering minimum required elsewhere on the same levee segment. His memo was logged. It does not appear in the final 1960 project report. The 1960 report lists the setback distance without explaining the discrepancy. Tate left the Corps in 1962. He gave a brief statement to a Delta Democrat Times reporter in 1981, saying only that the Cypress Landing line didn't match the math. He declined to elaborate further. He died in 1994. Picture yourself standing on the levee at the old landing site on a humid August morning. The river is low and brown below you. The land that held 340 people is open pasture now, flat to the horizon. Nothing marks where the town stood. That is only number 8. It gets much darker. Number 7. Mound Bayou Junction was a sharecropper settlement of 210 residents in Coahoma County, recorded in the 1950 agricultural census. County dissolution filings show the settlement school district was absorbed into the Clarksdale system in 1964. The filing gives no reason for the dissolution beyond declining enrollment. Here is what nobody tells you. Enrollment records held by the Mississippi Department of Archives and History show Mound Bayou. Junction School had 84 students in the 1962 to 63 year, 2 years before the dissolution. The 1964 filing cites declining enrollment without listing a current enrollment figure. A researcher requesting the underlying enrollment data in 2009 was told by the archives that the relevant box had been transferred in 1998. No transfer destination is listed. A retired Coahoma County school teacher named Odessa Marsh taught at the Junction School until its closure. In a 2002 oral history interview recorded by Delta State University, she said the families left within 18 months, all at once, like someone told them to. She did not say who. She passed away in 2011. Picture yourself at the Junction Crossroads on a still October evening. Kudzu has taken the foundation lines where the school once stood. The crossroad sign gives a road name and nothing else. The silence here is not the quiet of an empty field. It is the quiet of a place that was emptied. That is only number 7. It gets much worse. Number 6. The Indian Bayou Church Settlement in Sunflower County held 168 residents and a congregation dating to 1889, recorded in the 1950 census. The 1960 census lists 0 residents at the same enumeration district. No flood, fire, or relocation order appears in any Sunflower County public record between those two census years. Here is what nobody tells you. The church's burial register, held by the Sunflower County Historical Society, records 31 burials between 1950 and 1959. A community clearly still living and dying in place throughout the decade the census says it began emptying. The last burial entry is dated March 1959. No entry follows it. The register itself simply stops. A genealogist named Earlene Boggs researched the settlement for a family history project in 2014. She located 12 descendant families through church records, but found no two who agreed on why the community dispersed. She published a brief county history note in 2015, omitting the discrepancy entirely. She told a colleague privately that she didn't want to start something. Picture yourself standing at the church cemetery on a gray November afternoon. Headstones lean at angles in soft delta soil. The church itself is gone, only the foundation stones remain in the grass. 31 people are buried here, whose town the census says had already vanished. That is only number 6. It gets much darker. Number 5. Holcomb Depot was a railroad town in Tallahatchie County, population 290 in the 1940 census. The depot closed in 1957 when the rail line was rerouted. The official Illinois Central closure notice cites declining freight volume. Within 4 years, the surrounding settlement had dispersed entirely. Here is what nobody tells you. A depot agent named Walter Pruitt disappeared from Holcomb in October 1958, 1 year after the closure. The Tallahatchie County Sheriff's report, filed that November, lists him as a missing person and notes he had recently filed a formal complaint with the railroad regarding the closure's compensation terms. The complaint itself is referenced in the sheriff's report, but does not exist in any Illinois Central archive that has been made available. Pruitt's case remains officially open. No further entries were made after 1959. Pruitt's daughter, Loretta Pruitt Hayes, gave an interview to a Greenwood newspaper in 1989. She said her father told her, the week before he vanished, that the railroad didn't like what he'd put in writing. She moved to Memphis in 1962 and did not return to Holcomb again. Picture yourself standing at the old depot foundation on a cold December afternoon. The rail bed is still visible, a raised line of gravel running through bare cotton fields. No structure remains. A man wrote something down here in 1958 and was never seen again. That is only number 5. It gets much worse. Number 4. Belen was a timber company town in Quitman County built around the Belen Lumber Company mill. Population 410 at its 1930 peak. The mill closed in 1949. Company records filed with the state describe an orderly wind-down and full employee settlement. The Belen Lumber Company's corporate charter was formally dissolved in 1951. Its complete business records, required by Mississippi law to be filed with the Secretary of State, were never filed. Here is what nobody tells you. A 1952 Mississippi Department of Audit inquiry into the missing Belen records produced a single surviving page, located by a researcher in 2017 in an unrelated case file. That page references a settlement adjustment fund dispersed to company officers in 1950, with no corresponding fund dispersed to former mill workers. The remainder of the audit file does not exist in the state archive. The Department of Audit's 1952 annual report does not mention the Belen inquiry at all, despite internal correspondence confirming the inquiry was opened that year. A former mill worker's grandson, Curtis Renfro, requested the full audit file in 2018 through the Mississippi Public Records Act. He was told the file had been destroyed per standard retention schedule in 1979, 27 years after the inquiry, and several years longer than any standard retention period the department could cite. Picture yourself walking the old mill grounds on a humid June morning. Concrete footings rise from waist-high Johnson grass where the sawmill once stood. The Settlement Adjustment Fund paid someone in 1950. It did not pay the men who built this town. That is only number 4. It gets much darker. Number 3. Panther Burn Island was a Delta Hill Island settlement in Issaquena County, isolated by seasonal flooding and connected to the mainland by a single causeway. Population 95 in the 1950 census. In 1963, the Mississippi River Commission completed a flood control modification that permanently severed the causeway. The Commission's public notice describes the modification as routine channel maintenance. Here is what nobody tells you. A 1962 Mississippi River Commission engineering survey, conducted 1 year before the causeway modification, recommended against severing the connection, citing the isolation risk to year-round residents. That survey's recommendation does not appear in the 1963 public notice. The notice references engineering analysis without citing the 1962 survey by name. The survey's lead engineer, identified only as J.J. Kessler in Commission personnel records, has no further public record after 1964. A former islander named Virgie Coombs, interviewed by a county historical society in 1998 at age 81, said the families who remained on Panther Burn after the causeway closure left one boat trip at a time over the following 2 years. She said no one from the commission ever came back to ask if they'd gotten out safely. Picture yourself at the old causeway terminus on a still February afternoon. Open water sits where the road once continued. The island rises low and green across the channel, empty, reachable only by boat. 95 people were told the closure was routine. That is only number 3. It gets much worse. Number 2. Sligo was a plantation commissary town in Washington County, population 380 in the 1950 census, built around a single large landholding. The plantation's land transfer records show the property changing ownership in 1968 through a sale to an out-of-state agricultural holding company. The Washington County land deed for that 1968 transfer is on file. The chain of title documentation required to precede it, showing how the commissary land itself was originally allocated to the families living on it decades earlier, is not. Here is what nobody tells you. A title researcher named Phyllis Granger, working a 2016 case unrelated to Sligo, found that the county's chain of title index for the relevant section was missing 11 consecutive pages, precisely the years covering Sligo's original settlement. The county clerk's office told her in writing that the pages had been removed for restoration in 1979. No restored pages were ever returned to the public index. The 1979 restoration order itself cannot be located. A descendant of a Sligo commissary family, Robert Earl Tisdale, attempted to research his family's residency claim in 2005 for an inheritance matter. He was told by the clerk's office that without the missing pages, no prior claim could be established. He dropped the matter in 2007. He told a relative he didn't have the money or the years left to keep fighting county paperwork. Picture yourself at the old commissary site on a flat gray afternoon. The building is long gone. Only a raised concrete slab remains in the open field. 380 people lived here. Their claim to the ground beneath them is missing 11 pages. That is number 2. Number 1 is different. Number 1. There is no name for this place on any map currently in circulation. It sits in the Batcher, the flood-prone land between the river and the levee, along the boundary of 2 delta counties that, by long custom, neither claims jurisdiction over the strip in question. A 1961 Army Corps of Engineers land use survey references a settled parcel at that location under an internal tracking number. The survey was reclassified from public to restricted distribution before its final filing. The reclassification order gives no reason. Here is what nobody tells you. A retired Corps surveyor named Hollis Dement, who worked the Lower Delta District from 1958 to 1979, gave a brief recorded interview to a Delta State University oral history project in 2003. He confirmed a settlement existed in the Batcher at that location into at least the early 1960s. He said when he asked his district supervisor why the survey was reclassified, he was told it wasn't the Corps' business to explain who lived where the river could take them. He did not press further. He never returned to the site in any professional capacity after 1962. Dement spent his retirement in Cleveland, Mississippi, until his death in 2008. A researcher who later tried to locate his complete interview transcript found that the portion concerning the Batcher settlement had been excised from the university archive's public copy. The unedited recording, according to the project's internal log, still exists. It has not been made available since 2009. 2 Delta residents, interviewed separately in 2019 by a regional folklorist, both gestured toward the river when asked about the area and declined to say more. One, an elderly farmer in his 90s, said only, "Some of that ground was never really anybody's to talk about." He did not explain what he meant. He died the following year. Picture yourself standing on the levee crest above the Batcher on a gray autumn evening. The river is wide and the willow brush below is dense, holding mist close to the ground. A settlement existed down there, confirmed by a surveyor who was told not to ask why it mattered. The land has no name and no owner who will speak for it. The mist does not lift before dark. Some of these towns were taken by the river, some were taken by paperwork, and some were simply never written down to begin with by people who understood, long before anyone asked them to explain it, that silence was the only deed the Delta would ever honor. The river has kept that silence for them ever since.